Baked beans feel untouchable. A tin on toast, a fry-up staple, something people trust without thinking twice. But that trust gets ugly fast once you read the labels. Some UK beans hide over 10 grams of sugar in half a can and creep past 0.6 grams of salt per 100 grams. That is not comfort food, that is a quiet, nutritional ambush. So this investigation tore through 7 of the biggest brands, checked the numbers, tasted them side by side, and found something brutally clear. 3 of them are shockingly bad. Not mediocre, not questionable, genuinely awful. And once you see why, you cannot unsee it. Let's start from the brands that are doing it well. Number 1. Heinz beans. You can't investigate baked beans in the UK and not start with Heinz. It would be like reviewing tea and skipping Yorkshire. Heinz has been parked in British cupboards since 1886, and today it still controls well over half of the baked bean market. That's not hype, that's dominance. A standard 415-gram tin usually sits around £1.30 to £1.50 depending on the supermarket. Expensive compared to own brands? Yes. But here's what's actually inside. The classic recipe lists about 51% haricot beans and roughly 34% tomatoes. Per 100 grams, you're looking at around 4.7 grams of sugar and 0.6 grams of salt. The government's salt reduction target for baked beans is 0.56 grams per 100 grams, so Heinz nudges slightly above that. Not perfect. Not catastrophic either. Now taste. This is where Heinz earns its crown. The sauce is thick, glossy, slightly sweet but balanced with vinegar tang. The beans hold their shape. They're tender without collapsing into paste. There's a reason blind taste panels consistently score Heinz around 4.5 out of 5. It's consistent, almost stubbornly so. Is it angel food? No. Half a can gives you roughly 9 to 10 grams of sugar. If the NHS recommends no more than 30 grams of free sugars per day, that's still a third of your daily allowance before you've touched dessert. But compared to some rivals that dump in glucose syrups like their sweet shop owners on commission, Heinz keeps it relatively controlled. It's not flawless, it's just reliably solid. And in a market full of watery sauces and shockingly sweet imposters, solid is powerful. Heinz takes best number 1 because it delivers flavor, consistency, and a relatively clean label without veering into nutritional insanity. It's the benchmark. Everyone else is chasing it. If this kind of straight-talking food breakdown is your thing, hit subscribe. No sponsorship fluff, no brand worship, just brutally honest supermarket reality. Number 2. Branston baked beans. Branston walks into the aisle like the confident cousin who doesn't need to shout. Known for pickle, yes. But their baked beans have quietly built a cult following. Ingredient-wise, Branston mirrors Heinz in structure. About 51% beans, close to 38% tomato base, then sugar, spirit vinegar, modified maize starch, reduced sodium sea salt, paprika and spice extracts. Nutrition per 100 grams sits at roughly 4.7 grams of sugar and 0.6 grams of salt. So again, slightly over the salt target, but not wildly out of bounds. Here's the difference. Branston leans savoury. The sauce feels deeper, less dessert-like. There's a subtle paprika warmth and pepper edge that cuts through the sweetness. In blind tests from outlets like BBC Good Food, Branston regularly scores 4 out of 5 and often gets praised for tasting less sugary than Heinz, even though the numbers are nearly identical. Texture is where it shines. The sauce clings. It doesn't flood your plate. The beans are firm and evenly sized. No mushy carnage at the bottom of the tin. That matters more than people think. A watery, sloppy sauce is infuriatingly disappointing. Branston avoids that trap beautifully. Price-wise, it usually comes in slightly cheaper than Heinz, often around £1.20 to £1.40. Not budget territory, but competitive. Is it revolutionary? No. But it doesn't try to be. It refines the formula. It feels like beans for people who grew up and decided they didn't want their dinner tasting like pudding. Branston earns best number 2 because it delivers a richer flavor profile without cranking sugar into obscenely high territory. It respects the bean. And in a lineup where some brands commit truly unforgivable acts of sweetness, that restraint is refreshing. Okay, so the top 2 spots, big name brands, no surprises there. But what if you're shopping on a budget? Let's talk supermarket own brands. Number 3. Aldi Bramwells baked beans. If Heinz is the king and Branston is the refined challenger, Aldi Bramwells is the shock twist nobody saw coming. The budget tin that quietly humiliates brands twice its price. A typical 400 gram can cost around 40 to 45 pence. That alone should make you suspicious. Cheap food is often where corners get brutally hacked off. But then you read the label and things get interesting. Around 50% haricot beans, about 34% tomatoes, then sugar, modified starch, salt, onion powder, paprika, and a few spice extracts. Nothing terrifying. Nothing that reads like a chemistry exam. Nutrition per 100 grams lands around 4.8 grams of sugar and 0.53 grams of salt. That salt figure matters. The UK salt reduction target for baked beans is 0.56 grams per 100 grams. Aldi slips just under it, while both Heinz and Branston sit slightly above. That's not a massive difference, but small numbers stack up if beans are a weekly staple. Now taste, which is where this tin becomes borderline ridiculous. In blind taste tests, including panels like Which and BBC Good Food, Bramwells has scored as high as Heinz. Some tasters even prefer it. The sauce is slightly thinner, yes, but still rich enough to coat toast properly. There's a faint warmth from spices like paprika and clove that gives it a surprisingly layered flavour. Texture holds up too. The beans are firm. They don't collapse into sludge halfway through the tin. That might sound minor, but cheap beans often disintegrate into a miserable paste that feels like punishment. What really pushes Bramwells up the rankings is value brutality. You are paying roughly 1/3 of the price of Heinz for something that delivers about 90% of the experience. That price gap is staggering. Over a year, if someone eats 2 tins a week, switching from Heinz to Aldi could save over £80 without sacrificing much quality. It's not perfect. The sauce is a touch lighter and the flavour slightly less nostalgic. But at this price point, those complaints feel petty. Aldi Bramwells earns best number 3 because it proves something most supermarkets hope you never realise. Cheap doesn't automatically mean low quality. Sometimes it just means you're not paying for a blue label and a century of advertising. Number 4. Asda baked beans. Asda's own brand beans don't get much attention. No nostalgia, no cult following, no dramatic online debates. They just sit quietly on shelves at around 45 to 50 pence a tin, looking almost forgettable. And that's exactly why they deserve a closer look. Start with the numbers. Ingredient lists usually show about 49% haricot beans and roughly 36% tomatoes. Then sugar, modified maize starch, salt, paprika, and flavourings. Fairly standard. But the nutrition panel is where Asda pulls a quiet win. Around 4.2 grams of sugar per 100 grams and roughly 0.47 grams of salt. That salt figure is important. It sits comfortably below the 0.56 gram government target. Lower than Heinz, lower than Branston, even slightly lower than Aldi. It's not revolutionary, but it's a genuinely sensible formulation. Taste-wise, Asda takes a different approach. The sauce is thinner than premium brands, but not watery. There's a clean tomato tang with a mild paprika warmth. It doesn't try to be indulgent. It tries to be balanced. Some people might call it boring. That criticism is fair. But boring food is infinitely better than aggressively sweet nonsense that wrecks your sugar intake. Texture is decent. Beans are medium-sized and hold their shape reasonably well. No catastrophic mush at the bottom of the tin. No weird grainy mouthfeel. It's dependable, quietly competent. Where Asda really shines is nutritional moderation. Half a can gives roughly 8 to 9 grams of sugar. That is still sugar, yes, but noticeably less than some rivals that rocket into double digits with horrifying ease. If the NHS suggests keeping free sugars under 30 grams daily, those few grams saved actually matter. There are no flashy claims here, no premium storytelling, just a steady, sensible product that does its job without sabotaging your diet. Asda takes best number 4 because it represents something rare in supermarket food. Restraint. It doesn't chase sweetness. It doesn't over-engineer flavour. It just delivers a balanced tin that won't ambush you with hidden nutritional damage. Up to this point, things have been manageable. Not perfect, but respectable. Once you move past the safe options, the bean aisle gets ugly fast, and 3 brands cross from harmless comfort food into genuinely awful territory. Number 3. Sainsbury's baked beans. On paper, Sainsbury's own brand baked beans look completely harmless. Mid-range price at 45 to 50 pence. Familiar red tin. Nothing about it screams problem. In fact, if you're not paying attention, it feels like a safe swap from the big-name brands, until you check the numbers. A standard tin of Sainsbury's baked beans contains around 52% haricot beans, with the rest made up of tomato sauce, sugar, modified starch, salt, and flavourings. Pretty typical formula, but nutritionally they contain around 4.7 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That might not sound dramatic, until you do the maths. A typical half-tin serving, around 200 grams, gives you roughly 9 to 10 grams of sugar in one sitting. The NHS recommends adults consume no more than 30 grams of free sugars per day. That means a basic beans on toast breakfast can account for nearly a third of your daily sugar limit before you've even added ketchup or had your morning tea. For a savoury food, that's high. Taste reflects it. The sauce leans noticeably sweet, more syrupy than tomato-rich. Instead of that sharp, tangy balance you want from baked beans, you get a softness that borders on sugary. It isn't inedible. It isn't outrageous. It's just overly sweet. The beans themselves are fine. Texture holds up. But they're sitting in a sauce that feels designed to appeal to a sweeter palate rather than deliver depth or savoury comfort. And that's the issue. Baked beans are supposed to be savoury, comforting, balanced. When the sugar begins to dominate the tomato, it shifts the whole experience. Sainsbury's own brand lands on the reconsider list, not because it's disastrous, but because for a similar price, you can find options with better balance and lower sugar density. Beans shouldn't taste like dessert, and this one drifts closer than it should. Number 2. Sainsbury's Stamford Street Company, baked beans. If Lidl's problem is sugar overload, Sainsbury's Stamford Street beans introduce a different kind of betrayal. The kind that hides behind friendly supermarket trust and then blindsides you with cheap shortcuts. Start with the ingredients. Roughly 45% haricot beans and about 32% tomatoes. Already lower bean density than the better options. Then comes the real red flag. Glucose-fructose syrup. That phrase alone should make alarms ring. Glucose-fructose syrup is not just sugar. It is industrial sweetness designed to be cheap, potent, and extremely easy to overconsume. It is the same category of sweetener heavily criticized in ultra-processed foods. Seeing it inside something as basic as baked beans feels wildly unnecessary. Nutrition panels show around 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams. On paper, that may not look terrifying, but numbers alone do not tell the full story. Syrup sweeteners hit differently. They create a flatter, more artificial sweetness that lacks the natural acidity balance of tomato-based sugars. Taste exposes the trick immediately. The sauce looks paler and thinner, almost washed out. On the tongue, the sweetness feels oddly hollow. Not rich, not tomatoey, just a faint, artificial, sugary note that lingers awkwardly. It tastes cheap, because it is. Texture does not rescue it either. The beans are often smaller and softer, edging toward mush if overcooked. That might work for children, but for anyone expecting proper bean structure, it feels disappointingly weak. Price usually sits around 50 pence, which makes the whole thing more frustrating. This is not even the cheapest option. You are paying mid-tier money for a formulation that cuts corners with syrup instead of real depth. What makes this tin especially irritating is that better options exist at the same price. Aldi offers more flavour. Asda offers better nutrition. Yet this one sits awkwardly in the middle, propped up by brand familiarity. Sainsbury's Stamford Street earns stop buying status because it represents lazy formulation. Cheap syrup, weaker texture, forgettable flavour. When a supermarket that big delivers something this underwhelming, it feels inexcusable. Number 1. Lidl Newgate Baked Beans. This is where it gets ugly. Lidl Newgate beans look harmless. Around 50 to 51% haricot beans, roughly 34 to 36% tomato puree, standard on paper, then sugar, modified maize starch, salt, maltodextrin, spice extracts, oils, acids. It reads familiar, until you check sugar figures across different databases. On the label, it looks reasonable, around 4.8 grams of sugar per 100 grams. But serving sizes tell a different story. A 210-gram half can deliver about 10 grams of sugar. Some independent trackers even show versions edging closer to 11 grams per 100 grams. And here's the issue. There's no consistently tracked data across batches. Even at the conservative figure, half a tin lands you at 1/3 of the NHS recommended daily free sugar limit of 30 grams. For beans on toast, that is deeply absurd. Taste makes it worse. The first spoonful hits with a runny, syrupy intensity. The sweetness overwhelms the tomato base completely. There's no subtle vinegar balance, no spice complexity, just a heavy, sugary blanket smothering everything. It tastes as if the recipe was sweetened to cut costs, not to improve flavour. The texture doesn't rescue it. Many of the beans arrive squashed and the sauce clings in a sticky, almost glossy way that feels closer to dessert topping than savoury sauce. The price sits at around 40 pence. Cheap. Tempting, but nutritionally careless. This is the tin that exposes the illusion of budget comfort food. It leans so aggressively sweet, it borders on absurd. If you wouldn't sprinkle 2 teaspoons of sugar directly onto your beans, why accept it dissolved invisibly in the sauce? Newgate takes stop buying number 1. Not for being cheap, but for crossing from minor compromise into clear excess. In this lineup, it stands out for its high sweetness and lack of flavor balance. And at this price point, there are simply better choices without the sugar overload. Next time you grab a tin, remember how wildly different these beans really are. Small swaps cut sugar, salt, and regret instantly. If this breakdown saved you from a bad buy, subscribe for more brutally honest supermarket deep dives.